The 526th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Four Corners podcast. Just getting it shared into the last few groups here before I end up going live. Once again, here by myself, guys. But guess what? The man himself, Josh Marlowe, he is going to be joining us from the Spectrum Center at some point because after a game like we just witnessed from Tar Heel basketball, he is not going to be denied the mic. He's going to have to step on here. He's going to have to give his opinions on a game where Carolina got out to a horrendous start. It looked like they were going to be in for a battle all the way down to the end, and they were. Even though they started the second half incredibly well, it felt like, oh, maybe they can find a way to run away from this team as well, have another comfortable victory. That was not at all what happened. It was one of those games that you will look back on as a Carolina fan, and if somebody asks you, well, how did you lose this many years off of your life? Later on in life, that will be one of the games that you will point to. Carolina wins a nail-biter 68-59. And much like the first matchup between Carolina and Wake Forest, this one was a little bit closer than the final score would reveal to you, or the final score was misleading. Carolina was closer in that game than they actually were down the stretch of it. This game, the reverse way around. Wake Forest much closer in this game than the final score would suggest to you. But Carolina wins their 8th game in the last 9. They improved to 22-12 on the season. And that's right. They've gotten to that magic number. This was the number that John Hinson of the Field of 68, former Tar Heel, of course, said that Carolina had to get to. And they have gotten there now. So who knows? Does that mean that Carolina is in the tournament? Of course, we're going to talk to you about what's going on in the bubble later on in this edition of the podcast, or I will. I always so used to saying we, but clearly he's not here with us. The internet connection inside the Spectrum Center, not the greatest, or else he would have been here with us the whole time. But as I mentioned, we will get him here later on. RJ Davis leads Carolina in scoring with 23 points on 5 of 9 shooting, 5 of 6 from beyond the arc, 8 of 8 from the foul line. So all of the field goals for RJ coming from beyond the arc, just like we saw yesterday with Jalen Withers in his great game. It's the outside shooting that is the difference for Carolina's leading scorer. And this came in a game where Carolina needed him to shoot like that because here's the problem. Nobody else shot that well. Carolina shot just 34% from the field, 38% from behind the arc. Carolina made 8 threes in this game as opposed to Wake Forest 2, and that was a big difference. Another big difference for Carolina, or 2 big differences, the rebounding and the free throw line. It was the 2 things that we pointed to that were the difference in the first matchup. Carolina flips both of those and subsequently flips the result, as those were the areas that Carolina lost in Winston-Salem. But in this game, Carolina comes out on top. So overall, I thought, just one of those games that you were kind of expecting. You expected a slugfest. Wake Forest, as good as they are defensively, I thought they showed you that here today. And Carolina, things were very difficult for them for the majority of the game. It started out slow. Carolina then got into a little bit of a rhythm offensively. They came out and started the second half with a few shots, but then they hit a stretch where they missed 15 of 16 field goals. And part of it was that Carolina wasn't getting great looks, but a lot of that has to be credited to Wake Forest, who did just a great job defensively. Carolina, inside just wasn't really able to get much. That was for most of the day, but late in the game, Carolina gets exactly what they need. And I think that was the big thing that you could take away from this game. And we'll talk about it here more in a minute. But Carolina in this game, when they needed to execute down the stretch, they found a way to be able to do that. They didn't do it in the first game between these two sides. That was a game that Carolina had in their possession. It looked like they were going to be able to find a way to win that game, or they were at least locked in a battle that you thought they had a chance to be able to win that game, and they weren't able to make the plays late. Vin Allen Lubin, Jalen Withers make some huge plays late down low. Of course, RJ Davis hits a massive shot for Carolina, and that is really the difference when it's all said and done. Let's take a look at the box score a little more in depth for you guys here. A tremendous performance overall, late in the game by Carolina. But as I mentioned, relatively ugly box score for both teams. Neither team are going to be super proud of what we saw today. Carolina, as I mentioned again, 68-59, the final score in this game. Field goal percentage wise, both teams shoot 34%. Carolina, 19 of 56 from the field. That is as ugly as it has been for Carolina in a long time. Wake Forest, 21 of 62. But here's one of the big differences for Carolina in this game. 8 of 22 from three-point range for a 36% clip. Meanwhile, Wake Forest just 2 of 22 from three, 9% in this game. You go back to the first matchup between these two, very similar. Carolina 8 threes made in that game. Wake Forest just 2. And so Carolina able to recreate that, but clean up some of the other areas. I mentioned free throw shooting. That was huge for Carolina in this game. 22 of 27 for an 81% free throw percentage. Really solid there. Meanwhile, Wake Forest shoots 75%, going 15 of 20 at the free throw line. Carolina early in the game, just incredibly ugly. 8 minutes into the game, they had 8 turnovers, but they finished the game with just 12 total. And Wake Forest had 10 of their own. Points off of turnovers, Wake Forest with the advantage there, though. 16-12, as you would expect with some of the turnovers that Carolina was having early in the game. I mentioned rebounding was a big difference in this game. Carolina goes from -8 in the first matchup to +8. They pull down 46 rebounds to Wake Forest 38. Defensive rebounds, Carolina with 35 defensive rebounds to Wake Forest 10 offensive rebounds. Meanwhile, Carolina with 11 offensive rebounds to Wake Forest 28 defensive rebounds. Second chance points, Carolina with 10. Of course, had that big putback late in the game for Vin Allen Lubin. Wake Forest with just 7 bench points. Carolina with the edge there, 16-11. And then you got paint points, 30-18 in favor of Wake Forest. That was not really that shocking. That was an area that Wake was able to get to most of the day. Certainly an area Carolina will want to clean up when they get ready to take on the Duke Blue Devils. And then fast break points, Carolina with the advantage there, 7-4. Blocks in favor of Wake Forest, 6-5. But a key one late in the game that from Vin Allen Lubin that was pointed out in the post-game press conference by Steve Forbes as the turning point in the game. 6 steals for Wake Forest, just 4 for Carolina. 8 assists. Carolina not nearly as efficient from the field, and that's why they don't have nearly as many assists. 8 assists on their 19 made baskets, just 6 assists on the 21 made baskets for Wake Forest. The game was tied 12 different times, and the lead changed 12 different times as well. Carolina led this game for 18 minutes, 41 seconds. Wake Forest led it for 17 minutes and 57 seconds. Both teams at one point in this game had a double-digit lead, but ultimately in the end, it does not matter because this game was much closer down the stretch of the game. All right, guys, we get to the quote of the game. This from the head coach, Hubert Davis, who talked about RJ Davis and how the mentality that RJ is playing here, knowing that this could be one of the last times or could be the last time that he puts on a Tar Heel uniform every time that he steps out on the floor.
Yeah, there is urgency because, he has no more eligibility left, but there's also a sense of calmness and steadiness that this team has needed all year long. And especially in situations like, late game, having a guy like RJ that's been there, done that before, and being able to draw on his experience and how calm he is and be able to execute under pressure just helps out our team so much. And you have to have people, you have to have leaders like that on the team, and I can't think of anyone better than that than RJ.
Yeah, and that is exactly what we saw from RJ Davis in this game. He was absolutely tremendous down the stretch when Carolina needed to make shots. It was RJ Davis who was stepping up and making them. And even in the first half, getting Carolina back into the game, it was RJ Davis with his three-point shooting that was getting him there. But he hit some key free throws throughout the day too. But you just need a steadying presence like RJ Davis on the floor. And as this season has gone along, he has become more and more comfortable with being that steadying force there for Carolina. After early in the year, he was always that steadying force for Carolina, I think, the last couple of years, because you knew he was always going to be consistently there. I think in his mind, though, that steadying force was always Armando Bacot. And early in the season, without Armando there, you didn't have that guy that you could throw the ball inside to and just get a basket. Now, RJ is realizing that he is the guy that needs to step up, that needs to be the leader down the stretch in games. And he's been doing that really the second half of conference play. I think he's grown as the year has gone along, and especially during this streak where Carolina's won 8 out of 9. He has been a very consistent player that has made the plays when Carolina has needed him to. And you saw that yet again today, and that is a big difference for Carolina. I mentioned how good Carolina was down the stretch of this game. That's why it's going to be the stat of the game. And you may be saying, how do you have a stat of the game when it comes to the how well Carolina played in the stretch run? And we'll go with points in the final 4 minutes of this game, because the first matchup between Carolina and Wake Forest, it went in Wake Forest's favor. They executed down the stretch. They made the plays that they needed to in front of their home crowd, in front of a neutral site crowd. And it sounded pretty neutral site there today. I know Carolina fans probably did outnumber Wake Forest fans, but you could tell that Wake Forest fans definitely showed up and were trying to be loud. Carolina out executes Wake Forest. 11 points for Carolina, 3 for Wake Forest in those final 4 minutes. And that is ultimately the difference for Carolina. All right, let's transition into some of my takeaways. Again, you guys who are joining us, we greatly appreciate it. I know that some of you guys are in the middle of your workday hopping on here with us. We hope you enjoyed the game today, and we hope you're enjoying this edition of the podcast. Again, Josh Marlowe coming up live from the Spectrum Center here momentarily. I'm going to go through my takeaways real quick, and then we'll give him a call and bring him in on this. But, I mean, as I mentioned, RJ Davis, I think, deserves to be the storyline here, because the majority of the year we've heard a lot of people be incredibly critical about how RJ has been playing. This isn't what you would expect from a guy that came in as one of the preseason favorites for National Player of the Year. And, early in the year, I think that criticism was warranted. But as the year has gone along, you've seen RJ sort of evolve. He has, found his rhythm a little bit scoring wise. Ultimately, I still think, he'll end up finishing probably with around 18 points per game, which is really, really solid. I mean, I think that most people expected that he was going to be the, leader in the conference in scoring per game. But when you look at how some of the other pieces around him have developed, it makes a little bit more sense. He's become a better distributor as the year has gone along. And that was one thing that, we saw from him last year. We saw from him back in 2023, even more so. But I think this year he's definitely taken another step in that area. I mean, you look at yesterday's game, 6 assists in that game. Love the way that he shared the basketball in that one. Today, not nearly as many because there weren't nearly as many makes in this game. As I mentioned, it was a little bit of an uglier game, had just 1 assist in this one. But I do think that he is still a guy that is making plays when he needs to, passing the basketball. Today, he knew, I have to take over this game. This is on me to step up and make plays. And for him to knock down 5 threes, go 5 of 6 from beyond the arc, that's an area in particular that he has struggled. I think it's great to see him thriving in that area. And for anybody that said that RJ Davis was a waste of money bringing him back here, this guy's a failure this year. I've seen many people that said that throughout the year. I want to know where you're at now, because this dude is stepping up. This dude is trying to drag this team to the NCAA tournament. And it is a spectacle to watch when he's out there playing the way that he played in this game. He is just absolutely tremendous. Took over the most points scored in the ACC tournament title today, took that away from Lenny Rosenbluth earlier in the game. And so, RJ Davis just continuing to show you why he is truly one of the best scorers that we have had in program history. You move on to the big men, Van Allen Lubin, Jalen Withers. And you may be saying, well, it didn't really feel like they played nearly as well as they did yesterday. They absolutely did not play as well as they did yesterday. But when Carolina needed these guys to step up and make plays late, they were able to. Talked about the block by Van Allen Lubin that was credited as the start of the run for Carolina by Steve Forbes. I think, that moment, and then you have 2 huge finishes on the inside, one off an alley-oop. He finishes with a dunk, and then a second chance opportunity off a missed shot from the corner. I forget who ended up missing that shot. Van Allen Lubin follows it and slams it down. That was just an all-around great play from Van Allen Lubin, and those 3 plays down the stretch were so impactful. For a guy that was just 4 of 12 from the field in this game, when he needed to make an impact, he was able to do so. Another tremendous day on the offensive glass for him. 3 offensive rebounds, but came away with some important defensive rebounds as well. Jalen Withers steps up in this game yet again, 2 of 10 overall from the field, 2 of 7 from beyond the arc, but he hits a key 3 there in the second half and pulls down some key rebounds for Carolina when they needed to during that stretch late in the game. Also dishes out 3 assists, so moved the ball well. Really thought that he was impactful when he needed to be down the stretch. And those 2 guys deserve a lot of credit because, again, they were guys that early in the season weren't even really a part of the rotation. They weren't part of what Carolina was doing to the level that they are now. I mean, Jalen Withers, 33 minutes played in this game. Van Allen Lubin, 26 minutes, and they needed to play that much. Jalen Washington at times was effective early in the game, but got himself into foul trouble. Who knows if Van Allen Lubin's not able to get himself on track offensively, what that game actually ends up looking like. And then Jalen Withers, again, we've talked about how he is just doing a great job of being able to space the floor. And it opens up so many other things for Carolina. That's what he did today. Even though he wasn't able to knock down the shots from the outside consistently, he was still able to space the floor. He gave Carolina the rebounding that they needed, and he was able to slow down Trayvon Spillers in the second half after Spillers got off to a nice start to the game, scored 8 points in the first half, just 2 in the second half for Trayvon Spillers, and relatively ineffective on the glass, not nearly as effective as he was in the first half. So, credit to Jalen Withers. Certainly a much better performance down the stretch than early in the game from both him and Van Allen Lubin. I mean, you saw Withers struggling out of the gate early, actually got yanked from the game in the early portion. Hubert Davis decided to go to the 3-guard lineup pretty early, put him on the bench for a second, and then eventually got him back in there. And he was very impactful, as I mentioned, when Carolina needed him down the stretch of this game. Rebounding definitely showed up late, as I mentioned, with both of those guys. I think that was really the difference for Carolina in this game. Felt really even for most of the way. Some offensive rebounds for Wake Forest that created some second chance opportunities, but Carolina did a really good job down the stretch in those final 4 minutes of coming away with the rebounds that they needed to on both ends of the floor. Credit to, both Lubin and Jalen Withers. I thought they rebounded incredibly well. There were a couple of key rebounds throughout the day from Seth Trimble as well. I think, all of those guys deserve credit because Carolina, was needing those guys to make plays down the stretch after, that group didn't really make plays in the first game between these two sides. And that was exactly what Carolina was able to do in this game. In terms of the negatives, areas that Carolina has to clean up, the first one and the main one here is they've got to make it a little bit more difficult tomorrow for Duke to be able to get to the rim. Wake Forest was doing it way too easily early in the game, even into that second half. That was where Wake Forest was getting most of their baskets, were guys driving inside, finding a way to get a clean enough look at the rim and finishing inside. You need to make it more difficult tomorrow for a Duke team that is going to be able to knock down shots from the outside. That's the key thing for Wake Forest, and the reason why Carolina is able to win this game as well is because Wake Forest is just not a good three-point shooting team. So Carolina is going to have to do a much better job of staying in front of the dribble drive tomorrow. If they're able to do that, then you feel pretty decent about their chances against a Duke team that could be compromised and could, struggle a little bit more on the defensive end of the floor, especially with Malik Brown. We know he is not going to play. I'd be absolutely stunned. He redislocated that left shoulder, so it feels like it's going to be really hard to see a situation in which he plays. Cooper Flagg, meanwhile, we're going to have to wait and see on whether or not he's going to play, but we'll talk more about that when we get to the preview tomorrow morning. Officiating also going to be something that people are going to be talking about in this game. Here's the thing. I'm not going to spend too much time on it here because I want to get Josh on the line. I think the officiating in the ACC has been horrible all year. I think that there were times in this game today where, as a Tar Heel fan, you deserve to be frustrated, and as a Wake Forest fan, you deserve to be frustrated. This is the hand that, unfortunately, we have been dealt this year. This is not a good group of officials. They've seemed to get worse as the year has gone along. I mean, there were multiple times today, questionable out-of-bounds calls, questionable foul calls, just a mess. You get the double technicals, which I thought was ridiculous. Didn't think that, or double foul. It wasn't a double technical, but it was a double foul. You get the bench technical on Carolina, which I thought was really questionable. We've seen coaches definitely be even more animated than Brad Frederick has. So I think that's ultimately just a part of what we're dealing with this year in the ACC. So let's get Josh on the line. Let's see what his thoughts are about what we saw in the Spectrum Center today. Again, he's hanging out there. He's been there this entire week. So, I know he wants to get in here, talk about RJ Davis and the way that he has been playing here down the stretch. We're efforting him right now. Here we go. All right. Hey, buddy, what's going on?
Guys, what a win today for Carolina. Sitting here in the arena, getting ready for the night session tip-off, and the West Bryant just now leaving me. We've been sitting here chatting it up, but you got to be impressed with what you saw today from Carolina. I think from a mentality standpoint, man, they didn't come out ready to play in terms of protecting the basketball. A lot of turnovers very quickly, some pretty poor shot selection. They got down 10, but what this team has done the last 3.5 now, going on 4 weeks, right about a month, this team fought, and they got themselves back into the game. I thought Seth Trimble's defensive energy really played a big role in Carolina getting back into the game. You look at that halftime, and Carolina had a 2-point lead. I'm sure you said it, and I'll say it now. They didn't play very well. But that just tells you where this team is at right now, where they don't have to play at 100% to be able to lead a good team like Wake Forest at halftime. And in the second half, I don't know how many teams this time of year could win a game when they go nearly 10 minutes without a field goal. That got the calls that went against them go against them. But this team just fought through it. Credit, the senior leadership that R.J. Davis, Jalen Withers has provided this group. I thought Hubert Davis and the bench getting that technical foul was a big moment.
That was not on Hubert. He wanted to clarify that in the post game. I think they got Brad Frederick, who was as animated as we've seen him in a while, for sure.
And rightfully so. But something I've been critical of at different points in Hubert's career is, man, there's sometimes you gotta fight for your kids when you're getting jobbed. And from where I was sitting at, I thought the officiating was as poor as I've seen all year long, and I thought that was something that Carolina responded to in a positive way. Was okay. Coach Davis got my back. Coach Frederick's got my back. Well, then I've got no excuse. I've got to go out here and do what they're asking me to do. I've got to make sure I sprint back on defense. I got to make sure I set good screens. I got to give this team everything I have to give ourselves a chance. And when this team needed it most, R.J. Davis was there for them. Critical shot after critical shot, and just really proud of the effort. And I think this team, do we know if they secured themselves a spot in the tournament today or not? We don't know. But this team looks like a tournament team. They feel like a tournament team, and if they keep playing like this, it might not matter if they need that large bid, because they're more than capable of winning the ACC tournament.
You talked about how they were able to get back into the game. I think one of the things that I haven't talked about yet, but that I think needs to be brought up, is that a lot of that has to be credited to Hubert Davis, because they brought up on the broadcast again how quiet of a group this really is. And yet, for some reason, they come out, start this game slow. It didn't seem like they were, nearly as motivated as Wake Forest early on. It didn't seem like they were playing with that sense of emergency that Hubert Davis was talking about. But his intensity, I think, really woke this team up. I mean, he was asking them multiple times on the bench, what were we doing? How are you continuing to turn the ball over? How much credit does the head coach of this team deserve for getting his guys back into the game with what he was doing on the sidelines?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely deserves a lot of credit. We've been very critical at different times of Hubert, whether it's been this year or in the past couple of seasons. But, he recognized right away, hey, my team came out flat. And fans can get mad at that and say that should not happen with what's on the line, but that's what happened. So what are you going to do? How are you going to respond? Are you going to sit there? Are you going to whine? Are you going to pout? Or are you going to fight? And I think that's what this team decided to do. Was we're down 14-3. We've been here before. We've been able to work back from from this deficit plenty of times this year, so they weren't fazed by it. And I think once they put on their boxing gloves and stood into the ring, they were able to get back in the game quite a bit, or really quickly. Excuse me. And then they just did what they've done. During this winning streak, which, they wore teams out on the glass. They were all over the glass today. They got the shots to fall they needed to fall. For the most part, they were efficient enough at the foul line, and they played winning basketball. And Hubert Davis deserves a lot of the credit right now, because I think like he did, in his first year, and I think even a lot like we did last year, he is going to get every ounce of potential out of this group. And I still think this team is peaking, and I think no matter what, he's going to get as much out of them while they're here in Charlotte, and hopefully it's enough to get them a chance to go to Dayton and play in a first-round matchup, or maybe they've been backing themselves into a clean first-round matchup in the NCAA tournament. But make no mistake about it, man. Hubert Davis is not going to let this team go down quietly. He is going to press every button possible to make sure they play the way he wants them to play.
Now, how satisfying is it that R.J. Davis is the guy that carries Carolina today? I said earlier, I think he's been playing better down the stretch just in general, But today was one of those games where he needed to take over, and he did for Carolina. How good does that feel after there were people sending us messages during the season saying that we wasted our money on RJ Davis? He should have gone to, whatever level of basketball he's going to end up at after last season because he was hurting Carolina. When today he's clearly shown you that down the stretch of the season, he's helping Carolina.
Yeah, RJ Davis is a winner. And I think you saw that on display today. I thought the best thing he did was didn't force it out of the gate. It took him a minute to get into the scoring column, but I think he just knows he's at the point now where I can get mine whenever I need to get it, but I need help. I've got to get the bigs involved. I've got to get the other guys on the wings involved as well. And then when I need to go pick my spots, I can go pick my spot. When they had the sequence where Lubin got the block, they came down the other way, I think everybody knew where the ball was going. I think everybody knew who was going to take that shot because it felt just so monumental, so big at the time. Carolina runs a set that they've run many a time. They got him the ball in his spot, and he put the ball through the bottom of the net to give Carolina a 4-point lead. And so, I tried not to get choked up, but there was a smile that came across my face because we work with guys that I think have been overly critical of him to begin with, and then just be just wrongfully critical of him for some of the things that Carolina has endured this season. And so to see him playing at this level, being at the front, the face of Carolina's late season surge, brings a smile to my face because I don't know if there's a player in the country that deserves that spotlight more than RJ Davis and all that he's endured during his 5 seasons in college basketball.
Last thing I'll ask you before I get ready to get out of here on the podcast as well and get ready to head over to the Spectrum Center. You look at the way that the bigs played today, at times on the offensive end of the floor, not as impactful as you thought they were going to be, at least early. But down the stretch of the game, they made the impacts that they had to. What do how much credit do you give to the character and the work ethic of a guy like Vin Allen Lubin when, multiple times today the ball slips out of his hands? It looks like it's just going to be one of those days for him, and he steps up. And same thing with Jalen Withers. The 3-point shot wasn't falling all day, but he hits an important one late in the game for Carolina.
Yeah, I think I'll start with Vin Allen Lubin, man. He's not a perfect big, but he's a trying big. And all you really ask for at the end of the day is for your kids to play their best and to give the effort that the game requires, that the game demands. And, he left some plays out there on the floor, no doubt about it. Never once questioned his effort. But I think it speaks volumes that when it was winning time, Carolina ran that set where he got the alley-oop. That was an old set that Carolina ran when Lloyd Williams was the coach, and that was a set they used for John Henson. And a perfect pass, perfect execution. He got the putback dunk that all but sealed the win for Carolina as well. As long as if he can make the timely plays he has to make, it can make up for the plays that he doesn't make throughout the duration of the game. And then Jalen Withers, this is a guy that knows that every time he steps on the court, like RJ Davis, like Ty Claude, very well could be his last because it's not a certainty that Carolina is going to go dancing next week. I thought he was a little too conservative today. I thought there were shots that were in the rhythm and the flow of the offense that I wanted him to take, but kind of like Vin Allen Lubin, when he had to make a play, he was there to make a play. And so much about winning this time of the year is being confident. And there's not a doubt in my mind that Carolina believes when they get deep into a game in the second half, they're going to make winning plays. Whether it's RJ Davis, Ian Jackson, Elliot Cadeau, or in this case today, Jalen Withers and Vin Allen Lubin.
All right, buddy. Hey, great stuff. I always appreciate any chance that we can get you on the podcast when there's a scenario like this. I'll see you in a little bit. You rock, man.
All right, drop safe.
All right. All right, there he is, the normal host of this show, joining us on his own podcast. But love the insight there from him. And, yeah, just overall, what a great effort from Carolina in this game, because it would have been easy to slump the shoulders early on when it looked like things weren't going to go your way. this group stuck the course, and in the end, they make the plays that they needed to come out with a victory. And credit to Hubert Davis, as I said. You know, this one, it was special for him because it's his 100th win at Carolina. But at the same time, I think this was another one of those games that we've seen so many times throughout Hubert Davis's time here, where Carolina doesn't get out to a fast start. They got to grind their way back into the game. And especially with this team, it was on him to sort of get his team energized. He's talked about it all year, how this is a quiet group. Hell, he said it on Saturday when he was sitting there with those guys on the College Game Day set. And yet he has stepped it up here as the season has gone along. He has become more vocal and has demanded more from this group because he's figured out that that's what he needs to do. It paid dividends today. Great job executing down the stretch. And it's time to give out the game ball. And who do you think I'm giving it to? It's RJ Davis. 23 points in this game, was just outstanding. 5 of 9 from the field, 5 of 6 from 3-point range. So again, like I mentioned earlier, him and Jalen Withers so far in this tournament, they have had back-to-back games now where they've carried the team, and their 3-point shooting has been all of their made baskets from the field. He was 8 of 8 at the foul line again, and made the biggest shot of the game that put Carolina up by 4 after the block shot from Vin Allen Lubin. That was absolutely huge for Carolina and is the reason that they're walking away with a victory. Honorary game ball to Hubert Davis. As I mentioned, he gets his 100th win as Tar Heel head coach, and he becomes the first coach in Tar Heel basketball history to win 20 or more games in his first 4 seasons at Carolina to get to that number. I think it might actually have even been 22 or more games that they've won to get to that point. So just a sensational job of rallying the troops here on a season that at one time looked lost for Hubert Davis. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that are still going to be critical of him, but he has got Carolina in position to be able to make the NCAA tournament in a year where it didn't seem like early on Carolina had the talent, and in the middle portion of the season didn't seem like Carolina had the right mentality to be able to get there. And yet here we are sitting with the bubble where it's at. Want to give you a bubble update before we get ready to get out of here for this edition of the podcast. We've been doing this each time. And as of right now, Carolina, it still hasn't been updated. I know that Joe Lunardi's going to wait, probably is going to be updated here sometime soon, and maybe he has sent out a tweet. I'm going to attempt to check that here really quickly to see if he has sent something out here within the past few minutes so that we could get you an update on where exactly Carolina is at. But Carolina entered the day today as the last team in the field after last night. Most recent one is 22 hours ago from Lunardi. So yeah, it looks like he's going to wait until the end of the evening to tell you where exactly everybody stands. But I mean, here's the thing. Carolina got the results again today in front of them that they needed. Really, today was a much more successful day for Carolina than yesterday was. Team that's firmly in the field, probably going to make it. Arkansas, they lose to Ole Miss 83-80, lost that game at the buzzer. So I don't know if that helps the fact that they lost the game. Meanwhile, Xavier loses to Marquette 89-87. That was a team that was ahead of Carolina in the tournament. In Lunardi's last 4 in was actually the third to last team in the tournament. The second to last team in the tournament, Indiana, they lose as well. They lose to Oregon 72-59. So that's 2 massive losses right there. And then, Texas, another team that's on the bubble, they are currently in overtime against Texas A&M. That one's actually coming down to the end. So let me see if I can pull that one up here and be able to watch that one real quick for you guys to see what happens here at the very end of this game. Currently, Texas A&M with a 78-77 win in overtime against, or 77 lead in overtime. A&M now just hit another free throw, so now it's 79-77 with 17 seconds and ticking to go. Meanwhile, some of the other games that are on the docket tonight, Boise State faces San Diego State. That's at 5:30 on CBS Sports. So that's actually underway right now as Texas gets a dunk on the inside with 4.6 to go, ties the game up. Here comes Wade Taylor down the floor, and he throws a lob up that won't count. It looks like we are going to a second overtime there, so we're not going to stay on to update you on that. We're going to get ready to get out of here. Texas in double overtime. Hopefully Texas A&M can find a way to win that game. That would put Texas at 18-15 on the season, and you would imagine if they get to that point, just 3 games over 500, that could certainly help Carolina when it comes to staying ahead of them. As I mentioned, Boise State and San Diego State. Let's see if I can get out of here, get a check on that score for you guys really quick before we get out of here. 33-28 in favor of San Diego State, a team that right now is pretty firmly in the field. Boise State on the outside looking in, so you're hoping that San Diego State ends up pulling that one out. Meanwhile, other games on the bubble later on tonight. Baylor faces Texas Tech. You're pulling for Texas Tech in that one. Nevada against Colorado State. You'll pull for Nevada. That's 9 p.m. on CBS Sports Network. By the way, Baylor, Texas Tech, that'll be 7 p.m. on ESPN. You've got Oklahoma facing Kentucky in the SEC championship. That'll be 9:30 on the SEC network, although Oklahoma's win last night pretty much puts them in a position where they could make the tournament, you'd imagine. And a team to watch, just in case they do end up sneaking on back onto that tournament bubble, would be Villanova. They face UConn later tonight, approximately 9:30 on FS1. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. Guys, make sure you head over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Recap will be up there tonight. That's actually coming from the little man, Ashton Marlowe. He's going to come in and take over, write that recap for you because the internet connection, as I mentioned over there at the Spectrum Center, not the greatest. So he's going to take care of that. Josh will then have you with the preview for the Duke game tomorrow. We'll be back on the podcast side of things doing that as well. So make sure you don't miss out on any of that content over there on HeelToughBlog.com. Same thing with the football side of things. Did have an announcement on the spring game that was made official yesterday from On3 Sports. But find out what Carolina is going to be doing in place of their spring game, which is not going to take place. We have that in the article for you guys, so make sure you check that out. And any other recruiting news that we've got going on, I'm going to write an article, hopefully if I can, on my phone while I'm over there at the Spectrum Center, if I have enough internet connection. Got to pray that it gets better during the night session. Hopefully I'll be able to write something and throw it up there on Damon Ferguson, getting ready to take an official visit in the summer after he was on campus this past weekend. So plenty of recruiting stuff that we will be having you guys covered on over the next couple of weeks as Carolina gets ready to host a lot of big-time targets. So that does it for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank all of you guys who were able to tune in and watch this live, all those who will listen back. Want to thank Josh for stopping by with me. And as always, go Tar Heels.